Greetings. My name is Nadia McConnell. I am the co-founder and president of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. For over 30 years, we have been supporting the U.S.-Ukraine bilateral relations and also the people of Ukraine as they have built their democratic nation. And today, we've been supporting the people of Ukraine yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And today, the people of Ukraine, as Tim Tyner said, it's the Russian military that is fighting, but it is the people of Ukraine that are on the front lines. And of course, but that includes their fantastic military as well. So today, we are very fortunate to have with us many of the leaders of Ukraine who from the local communities who are on the front lines of this fight for their independence and their freedom and sovereignty. Today's title, Winter is Coming. For many, it evokes the very popular game, TV series Games of Thrones, something which I did not see, but I understand that the reference to winter is coming is that there was, in the various battles, that the greatest of evils would be coming. Well, the people of Ukraine are facing this winter, but for them, it is not a game at all. It's a matter of survival. Perhaps the only similarity between the Games of Thrones and winter is coming to Ukraine is that Ukraine is facing an evil, the greatest of evils that it has faced in recent history. So today, we are very fortunate to hear about what it is what are the needs for the coming winter. Not only the overall needs that is being provided by various governments, international organizations, but what is it that organizations such as ours, NGOs, can help to prepare people of Ukraine for the winter that is coming. I am honored to have with us today as the moderator, one of our very first partners in Ukraine that we started working with, and that's Oksana Tipa, who is the charter president of Kyiv Rotary International. And Oksana, I will turn it over to you to moderate the session. Thank you, Oksana.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for your trust and support. My name is Oksana Tyupa. I'm the charter president of Kyiv Rotary International. We are based in Kyiv, and starting from the first days of the war, we began to operate as volunteers, getting help from all parts of the world. We are thankful to the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation for providing support. They were one of the first to begin supporting us, and from the very first days of the war, we began to help people who had to flee from their homes because of the shelling and suffering caused by the war. As soon as in March, we opened the first shelter for such displaced people with the help of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. We are thankful for your support and trust in us. At this time, I can say that first and foremost, we understand that displaced persons require a lot of attention. Ukraine was not prepared to deal with such a big invasion. And there are statistics showing that over 800,000 people lost their homes, that were ruined with bombs and shells. They cannot be brought back to life. New homes will have to be built. We don't even know what's happening in the occupied territories. We don't know how people are going to return there after the victory, what kind of homes are waiting for them there. we don't know. But at this time, we receive support from several regional administrations. They have started to provide us without charges public spaces in schools and kindergartens that are temporarily not in use for placing such temporary displaced persons, as we call them, IDPs. We also signed an agreement with the International Migration Organization to conduct audits of such shelters at concentrated locations of IDPs in different cities. We've done this in Dnipro and also doing this in Poltava. We'll soon go to Kropivnitsky and other cities. It is very important for us to do such audits in order to understand what else needs to be purchased, what kind of equipment and setting is needed. At this time, there is no full statistics about how many births have been provided because this statistics changes. People come and go in search of better situation. But we know there were such instances when people were not able to find a location, a safe location for them, and had to go back to less safe communities. So we would like to begin our conversation today by giving the floor to each local government leader who was taking part in this conversation, so they share their experience of work with IDPs. It is very important that the donors, the public sector, non-profits and governments work together hand in hand for the better future of our residents. At this time, we are already thinking about purchase of things needed for the winter, such as heating devices and other necessary home appliances for those residential spaces. Also purchase of appropriate kinds of fuel for heating of those places. We know winter is coming soon. We also talk about repairs of those buildings where it is needed, so those buildings remain warm. And we don't know how much longer the war will last. We hope the victory will come soon, but we need to prepare for a lengthy, prolonged conflict. And we need to act accordingly, because our people is the greatest treasure, the greatest asset that we have. So now I would like to ask the first deputy of Chernivtsi Oblast Administration, Mr. Kovalyuk, to speak next. Thank you for the invitation to share about the work we do in our oblast. Shelters for refugees is a very important issue. I can say that, first of all, a big number of people leave the war zone without understanding where they're going to be. And they call their friends and relatives or neighbors who left before them, and they ask where I should go. Where should I go? So the presence of such shelters tell people that there are places where they don't need to sign up in advance or to have cash ready to pay with, and this place gives you an opportunity to stay overnight in normal conditions without paying for it. And so these facilities have an important social function. They give people hope, and protection, a sense of protection. Since February 24th, our oblast, because it's near the border, has hosted over 100,000 refugees or displaced persons. Many of them are still staying here. We think about 72,000 are now regular residents of the oblast and are not going to leave it until winter. Over 20,000 of them are children. This means that a big number of these IDPs are socially vulnerable groups, mothers with children or elderly people who came leaving behind their grown-up children or husbands. So we are preparing for the winter season. Support like we're discussing here is very timely, very needed, because our budgets are limited to find resources to put those facilities in order before the winter. All in all, we have 98 such facilities that are prepared to be converted into shelters, each hosting from 50 to 300 residents. Why this is approximate? Because only a month ago the government allowed local communities to spend certain funds on fixing those shelter facilities, and they are doing that now. Our strategy overall is this. We facilitate or propose to local governments those facilities that are located close to social community services, where people would not feel they are isolated from communities. Our oblast, all in all, is quite densely populated, and many of these facilities are located in the vicinity of the major city, the oblast center. They are often in the outskirts of the big city, and that makes it easier to place the IDPs at different communities. Why we were asking not to place those people in big concentration in major cities, so that they feel there are others around them, not just IDPs like themselves. So they would socialize with the local communities and become a part of them. Many community leaders are just beginning to realize the need, the importance to work with those people. Many communities only start to realize that such new residents, IDPs, give them new opportunities for development, because many of those people are well educated, and of course it's hard for them to find jobs in the economic sector. West Ukraine was never famous for actively working mass employment industries, but we are helping those community leaders, mayors, to understand that they have to help these new residents to be socialized. So if we choose a facility as a shelter, it has to be closely located to transportation routes, to bigger cities that are economic magnets. Number two, they have to be equipped with all necessary utilities, including the internet, as well as central heating and central running water, so people would not feel that they are isolated and forlorn in the middle of winter. Number three is these local communities need to understand that the refugees are not just a burden but also an opportunity for their own development. So we want to use such communities as models and positive case studies for other communities to follow and use their best practices to develop their social spaces. This way, we will mitigate psychological traumas for the settlers, the IDPs, because many of them we expect will stay here even after the war is over. When we go to the East as volunteers, when we hear from these people when they come to us, gives us a feeling that in the next 1 or 2 years we cannot expect a very quick recovery of housing in the East. There are natural, clear trends that tell us that these shelters are going to be used for the for the displaced people in the next 1 or 2 years at least. We understand this is our task, to do all this as quickly as possible and create appropriate conditions for the people to live through the winter. Our oblast is special for giving us an opportunity to use electricity as well as natural gas for heating. We have hydropower plants and we have powerful solar batteries. We also have forestry, and in the country a lot of boilers are set up that use solid fuel, and communities experience of communities from the past shows that this is inexpensive and efficient. With least spending we can live through heating season pretty well. So we do not expect any particular issues with heating in small towns or villages, but in the oblast city we have a lot of high-rise residential buildings. So if the natural gas network is attacked by Russian missiles or bombs, Chernivtsi and other bigger cities will be vulnerable to have their heating disrupted in winter. So we are aware of that risk and we work with local governments to minimize those risks. I can share more information on other issues. All the shelter locations we propose are well described with photos and descriptions, how much money is needed for each to put them in order. There is a certain gradation. Some need cosmetic repairs, others need more in-depth repairs. Again, as I'm emphasizing, we work on all that information and it gets updated all the time, because each local community uses their local resources in order to put those facilities into a usable condition. Thank you. Now I would like to invite to speak the Deputy Chief of Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, Ms. Sirko. Good afternoon and glory to Ukraine. I would like to start by saying thank you to all those who are listening to us, the donors who did not give us up from the very first days of this Russian invasion. We are thankful for all the support you are giving to us, to our oblast in particular. All our efforts are now aimed at facilitating the internally displaced persons who had to migrate across Ukraine's territory to leave the war zones where Russian aggression, military aggression is taking place. We provide support for such IDPs as well as for for the warriors defending now our sovereignty and independence. Just like my colleague in Chernivtsi, I can say that our oblast is not very large in population, 1.3 million residents. However, at this time we have received over 146,000 IDPs. This accordingly is 98,000 families, 46,000 children aged under 18, over 4,000 people with disabilities, and we also had 13 families moved from family-style orphanages, and also families with adopted children. All this is now a responsibility for our administration to help, as well as the local communities and governments who provide housing placement for those individuals who need it. There was a big need in providing births for elderly people with geriatric conditions who need regular care. At this time, we are short of such places for them. In fact, there are no vacant beds in such specialized care facilities. We only have contracts for about 100 beds in such specialized facilities, and there's a need for 400. Currently those people are placed on hospital beds, and we realize that those beds are needed by other types of patients. So now we are trying to get repairs and improvements completed in those facilities where geriatric IDPs can be placed. This will mean not just a reprofiling and repairs, but also providing medical staff for those facilities in these specific communities where such people will be placed. I also want to mention that the Oblast has extended a helping hand to boarding schools. We have over 300 such children with boarding schools who moved to us from eastern regions. That includes children on wheelchairs, and we got placements for them in our specialized facilities. All across the oblast, we now have an immediate need for reconstruction, current repairs, or fundamental repairs of those buildings that could be used for long-term stay of IDPs. Of course, all this has been done since the spring, because we saw at the beginning when the IDPs came for a short term, then the short term became mid-term, and now the mid-term is turning into a long-term stay, and every day we see requests for additional placement of IDPs, and this become even more pressing when winter comes. At this time we have 98 such facilities of different forms of ownership. I mean, some of them are owned by the Oblast government, some are owned by local communities, and they could be ready if the repairs are completed. Then they would be ready for placement of IDPs for housing there. We also make sure that inclusivity and geriatric profiles are included for such. There are facilities with those requirements, as well as boarding school types. So So we have a full vision how to use those facilities in the future and how to serve local territorial needs. In the future, they could be used as social housing or housing for the military or housing for low-income families, families with many children. So when we plan to spend those monies, they could also, those facilities could also be used as summer recreation, for summer recreation purposes. There are 23 such facilities which are now considered by donors, but there is a time frame that is not fast. There are bidding procedures, engineering studies are done, and we still don't have a final decision on any of those facilities. So my great request, if possible, is to help us with current or more in-depth repairs of those facilities. At this time, the province is preparing to begin the school year. So those facilities where IDPs were placed temporarily are now need to be brought back to academic use. So those IDPs who were temporarily placed at schools, school buildings now need to quickly be relocated with funding from local governments. Alternative facilities are getting quick repairs, cosmetic repairs. So the need, the demand for repair services is very big. Another major issue that we are working on is rental housing. There is a charity foundation Caritas who provided such funding, and 150 families received their support in the form of rental payment for 3 months. We understand that the funds are limited, so this was a great help for us. However, once those 3 months expire, this will be a new problem, how to extend the rental agreements. Also, another important next step we are working on is working with our sanatoriums, holiday homes. We have 17 such holiday homes which provide recreation for children, but we have made arrangements with their owners and managers so that if funding is provided to pay for people's stay, they could accommodate IDPs. Those are privately owned facilities, and owing to the government regulation number 261, will be able to accept requests for reimbursement from those facilities. But the nuance is that those IDPs will not be able to cook for themselves, because those facilities only have professionally equipped kitchens, and so the fees will have to cover both living and meals. Another question is fuel. For low-income families that were hosted by private owners of houses in the countryside, in villages. They use solid fuel. So we have collected such information, about the needs and how much firewood will be needed for each of those families and households. The calculations are in place, and if this can be addressed with assistance, we'd be very thankful. One other issue I want to raise is if this is possible, we would appreciate assistance in reconstruction of a medical facility that we prepare to use for rehabilitation of people with disabilities, spinal patients. This had been started before the big war erupted, but now we can see that we are one of those oblasts that receives medical trains with wounded soldiers. Here in our oblast, we do not have such rehabilitation facilities, and we have documentation for that new project, but because of the war, there is a lack of money. The calculations of needed budget for that project is ready, and there is a team of skilled staff that will work there, and they are being trained in Poland. So if this reconstruction could be supported financially, that would be a great help. There is a possibility to add additional rehabilitation gyms and exercise rooms. One other thing I want to mention is that we have over 50 local enterprises that were relocated from the east. They are beginning to function. Job placements is an important priority for us. So we were contacted by 3,400 individuals from among the IDPs, those who are looking for jobs and would like to work and earn an income to maintain and support their families. 1,493 have received the status of unemployed. So what we are looking for is grant projects that could help those people look towards self-employment. It's people who lost everything, those who had certain businesses in the territories they left. And there are many potential business ideas. So if those people could be helped with planning their business, this or maybe some seed money to start a business, so help them analyze which field they should work in, we'd very much appreciate such help. Thank you. Our next speaker is Valentina Franchuk, Chief of the Education Department in Poltava Oblast Administration. You're welcome. Greetings to everyone. I'm very pleased to attend this special discussion. I would like to thank the organizers for bringing us into this discussion and do it together. There are many issues that need to be addressed and require assistance. Now I would like to ask my colleague Irina Ohorodnikova, who will speak about our situation in more detail. I am Irina Ohorodnikova, an assistant to a member of parliament, Ustenko, who leads the Servant of the People faction in Poltava. So, among other things, we are now working on issues of shelters, their equipment. Just a few days ago, we made a study tour to the shelters around the oblast, together with representatives of the ministry from Kiev. We analyze the needs of the IDPs currently staying at facilities of educational sphere. So I currently have the numbers that reflect the needs across every county of the oblast. Also the overall number. For instance, there are now 2,044 people staying at school buildings. Additional needs, so there are 5,000 places for them to take, and the total need is about 7,000. We have photos and additional information about the facilities that need to be created for them or prepared for them. It is no surprise Poltava Oblast is on the top of numbers. Right now it's maybe informal numbers. The number of currently staying IDPs here has added another 100,000 on top of the 200,000 that we had before. So the issues of housing for IDPs and jobs is very, very important. Our oblast is right in the area that adjoins the war zones in the east, active hostilities. So we are an economically well-doing region. It potentially can provide jobs for many people, and this is the first priority that can be of interest for those who want to help with development. On our part, we are trying to support this region with facilitating export opportunities via bilateral connections. We have sent appropriate information to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but these steps need to go in harmony with donors, grant givers. So we are asking everyone who would like to help to promote information and educate the business people who want to come and work in Poltava Oblast and take part in our export, utilize our export opportunities. We help to develop our labor force, human resources. Many young people come to our territory. There is an interesting project that we visited ourselves. There was a family who, a young family who received space in the central part of Poltava, and they spent their own money to set up an art space there where children who suffered from the war, the IDP children, getting art therapy sessions at that facility, and they study art. So all this is a project that IDPs pay for, but the local government does not have money to contribute to the project. So this project is essentially a personal initiative of those of that family. And this is not just one such example. Our oblast is quite active in self-organizing, grassroots organizing by the IDPs. There are many opportunities for new projects and activities. So we talked with the local government about legal aspects of providing spaces for facilities for such projects. The government is quite open about providing such spaces and using them for the future. Our next speaker is from Kyiv Oblast. She is a member of City Council in Irpin. Oksana Nechitailo. I represent my city, Irpin, in this discussion. It's a community that suffered very much in the war. It was under occupation for a month, so our statistics differs from those other regions. Many of our people are among the IDPs who are in your territory, and we are very thankful to you. Regarding our situation today, number one, we are a community that has suffered the most in the war. In our private sector, over 1,500 houses have been ruined and cannot be rebuilt. Over 1,000 private houses are in the category that can be rebuilt, and we are trying to help that. Regarding high-rise apartment housings, many require dismantling, but over 200 of high-rises were damaged but can be fixed. So our community is now in a phase of search for resources. We actively look for resources so that before winter has come, we'll be able to renew more of our housing and give more of our residents opportunity to live here. At this time, we have created 3 so-called shelters. Those are temporary housing for those whose homes were destroyed. Some of them live in railroad cars. 65 people live in those railroad cars. And last Saturday we opened a mobile compound where 360 people moved in immediately, and they will stay living there. We are planning another such compound for the same number of residents. We collaborate with Artem factory and signed an agreement to use their holiday home as a shelter. And owing to the help of Ms. Tupa, Oksana was helping us with many other projects we did even before the war. At this time, we are looking for resources, funding, so Oksana is helping to implement the project of creating that shelter and providing appropriate conditions for the IDPs. All that is what we are working on. We have 3,200 registered IDPs in our community. Some of them are our residents who lost their homes, and there are also, surprisingly, some IDPs who moved to us from other places like Mariupol or Kharkiv. Of course, Irpin, our community is close, very close to the capital, and so there are some opportunities for people to work there. Businesses that are located here are spending their own monies to rebuild their facilities, and whereas government funds are only sent to rebuild social infrastructure and critical infrastructure. We already have certain entities that are helping us to rebuild schools. All our schools were ruined, and unfortunately those schools cannot be used as shelter spaces. So for us it is very important to resolve the needs for temporary housing. Over 60% of our infrastructure has been ruined. This is why we cannot find a place to provide people temporary housing, a place where they could stay overnight. It's very difficult right now. So we have to use such facilities as railroad cars or modular mobile homes. We are putting every effort right now into searching for assistance for reconstruction and purchase of building materials, construction materials. That is the best thing we can do for people, to help them rebuild their private homes, if that is possible. About 40% of ruined housing every day loses the capability to be rebuilt because of rain and other weather impact. Many houses were initially listed as category 2, now they are moving into category 3. Rain prompts rain provides further damage for walls and for all the property inside those ruined houses. So for us, this is a very pressing issue, and we are trying to find as much construction materials as possible. Regarding shelters, in the holiday home that I mentioned, there is a need to carry out reconstruction and thorough repairs of some of the buildings of that holiday home. There are rooms, we need to create more usable rooms there and put in equipment both for grown-ups and for children to live there. There's another important need. We need to find resources for temporary recreation and rehabilitation for our residents. Many of them come back to live here or to work here, but they don't bring their families and children because it is impossible to provide proper conditions for children to stay here. So they leave their children behind, and we are trying to find resources to provide recreational facilities for both children as well as elderly people. There were about 3,000 residents that stayed through the occupation. Those were mostly elderly people who were not able to move out, and now they have post-occupational syndrome, who now require psychological rehabilitation help. And we are very interested in any assistance along those lines. Finally, I would like to mention the statistical numbers. Of course, we would like, if it's possible, to collaborate with our communities so we could jointly resolve issues of placement for such residents. Many of these people used to be neighbors. If their housing was ruined, it would be great if they could be placed in shelters together in other oblasts and cities. That would help them socialize and diminish the trauma. We received a proposal from the Rotary Club. There was an idea to create joint entrepreneurial projects where those people could perhaps make some income and cultivate some entrepreneurial skills and maybe make joint business projects. That's an idea for the future for our city as well. We are a vibrant community because we are near the capital city and we get many visitors. Unfortunately, the visitors who come to us from Kyiv now, they come for sad issues. Practically every high-ranking visitor who comes to meet with Ukraine's government, they are shown the destruction of Irpin. And we hope that jointly we will fix this. Okay, looks like we lost connection with Oksana. So, with your permission, I will recognize our next speaker. That's Mr. Kotukov from Kharkiv. We are moving further east from west. So, Kharkiv is a community that gets a lot of damage from the war. And Mr. Kotukov is official of the city government responsible for international connections and investment. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to talk with you. Because our time is limited, I will speak very concisely. As Nadia McConnell has mentioned, winter is coming. And accordingly, I will speak about what's going on here. The white snowflakes will come here first before anyone else. The infrastructure of Kharkiv gets a lot of damage from the warfare. Our heating stations have been damaged. So speaking of the needs we currently have, near 30% of our housing infrastructure has been ruined. That's number one. So there is a need in construction materials that would allow to at least cover the contours of those buildings, because people, about 500,000 people, are still living in the city, and they will continue living in buildings which receive damages. Number two, we need radiators and diesel generators that would allow us to live through this winter. Number three, we have every opportunity to continue manufacturing of individual heating devices, small ovens to place inside residential buildings. We need a little more money to develop this, but we also need hard fuel for those little heating devices, pellets, etc. We would appreciate help on that. Thank you. So now there's a question about how many people in your territories can afford paying for their housing. In my community, it's not more than 20–25%, because all others are people who work on low government salaries or those who are too low income. There is no stable government program that would provide funding to support such housing spending. There have been some one-time payments, but we don't know whether it's going to continue. The same applies to payments from the United Nations and other international payments. Typically, those monies would be provided for only a month at a time. So there is no stable feeling that any stable program will be available to provide social support for people in rental in paying for their rent. We don't have that. The same I can say about the legislative initiatives currently discussed in the Verkhovna Rada. There is a program called Shelter, Prichistok, but it's a complicated program. It mostly envisages reimbursement for those who lease their property for rent. So most people will keep looking for free housing and would only be able to pay for utilities ideally. Thank you. Now I would ask Ivano-Frankivsk to answer the same question. The individuals who lived and continue to live in communal ownership facilities, the socially vulnerable people, that's who they are, which is why they don't have the monies to pay for rent. By the same token, those who stay at healthcare facilities or boarding schools, of course, they will need support to cover the cost of their stay. Those are low-income families. In terms of percentages, I cannot tell you accurately, but over 22,000 people have used that program Prichistok, and so owners of those homes accommodated them, and then they receive reimbursement of 400 hryvnias per month per every displaced person staying there. The people who now stay at medical facilities, that's over 400, and there is a certain number of children that also require not only free housing but also free meals. Accordingly, there are government programs that provide reimbursement or financial support in the amount of 2,000 hryvnias per grown-up or 3,000 per a person with disability or a child. This assistance has been paid since May for the people displaced out of active warfare regions. All of those people were receiving those assistance at the beginning, and currently we have over 101,000 applications for such payments, and accordingly 1,400,000,000 hryvnias has been spent on those payments. There are arrears, but the government is handling that, and international donors help again, so it's being paid. As for owners of private homes, they do receive that reimbursement. As I said, at this time it's 450 hryvnias per person. If they hosted those people free of charge in their homes, and at this time it's been suggested, which I think will be accepted soon, in order to increase that reimbursement amount twice. That reimbursement for keeping IDPs in their homes. Thank you very much. I also want to add, we also have donors for shelters. There are 11 international partners who also provide such help in the amount of 2,220 hryvnias. This is for low-income people. They can obtain it up to 3 times. According to the records of international organizations, we hold a meeting of a coordination council twice a month with all international donors involved in any of the humanitarian assistance. According to their records, they have paid $13 million in the form of such one-time assistance. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the details you provided. Now let us ask this question to the representatives of Poltava region, and Irina Ohorodnikova will answer. You asked about the percentage. I said already we have informal data regarding IDPs over the most recent month. The percentages change very quickly, but what we could see when we made a study tour, the majority of people who stay in the communal facilities such as schools, they certainly people are in need of financial assistance and meals. They need personal hygiene products, a standard set of supplies for their daily lives. So for the most part, those people are in need of assistance. Whether government programs are enough, yes, they receive those one-time payments of 2,000 hryvnias, but that's a temporary measure. Regarding financial assistance from the United Nations, yes, 2,200 hryvnias per person are being paid. However, it's not the amount that can cover all their needs if it's a family. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Oksana from, Alexander from Kharkiv. In Kharkiv, we are trying to send people to the oblast, to the oblast territory outside Kharkiv, because Kharkiv is very dangerous. We have lots of IDPs in cities like Krasnokutsk and Krasnograd. Krasnograd has 50,000 residents and 30,000 IDPs as an example. So, of course, there are limited capabilities to host them. Indeed, there is a need to have more dorms, and they should be set up at places like holiday homes, but local budgets do not have enough monies. Rental costs are high. The number of people who can pay for the rent is very small. People often were leaving without anything, like from places like Tsirkuniv. They were leaving everything behind. So they need everything now, humanitarian assistance, medication, everything. So, Oksana Neshitailo, regarding rental costs, most of our residents lost their homes, and because those regions that were destroyed were mostly post-Soviet housing where older people were living. Their main source of income would be government pensions, so they certainly don't have enough money to pay for private rent. Only 20 or 30% of the residents who are younger people may be able to pay private rent. We are near the capital city, Kiev, and so our rental market rent costs are pretty high. More than 50% of the people do not have that money. International Medical Corps and some other international entities were helping them for 3 months. Those who lost their homes were receiving 2,200 hryvnias. This program has been restarted again. And those who registered as IDPs continue to receive 2,000 hryvnias per month, but of course that is not enough money. So the waiting list for placement at shelters is now about 4,000 people, those who are ready to come and live somewhere in Irpin, but there is no place to accommodate them now. So even though lots of people were evacuated and many did not come back, rental prices went down, but still, at this time, it is not affordable for many of our families who are in need of such housing. In addition to help from the United Nations or from the government of Ukraine, we also have another program called Binance, and Rotary helped us to implement that program, but there were no other programs of this kind at all.
Thank you so much for this discussion. I think it's an important discussion for those of us who are not on the ground and have the ability to really get a overall strategic vision of what the situation is and what the needs are. And I really appreciated you bringing out some very critical issues that you're facing that I think we need to incorporate into our strategic planning. I think this should be one of the first of these kinds of webinars that we hold, because it's only when we hear from you directly who are in the front lines that we can be most helpful in terms of how we organize ourselves. We will, perhaps the way to conclude this, or at least for next steps, several of you mentioned that it's time to go back to school for children. And again, for those of us that are here in the United States, we have limited perhaps ability other than to secure funds to do some of the critical work that you've talked about, repairs. And we have been discussing that and seeing how we can support you in those critical infrastructure needs that are, to survive the winter. But in addition, we asking you, what are some sort of other things that we could be gathering and sending children going back to school? What kind of perhaps supplies that they might need? And also if there are any specialized, as I said, kind of clothing that perhaps we should focus on. But again, the heating issue is big. Just FYI, we have just purchased 4 water filtration systems that we will be sending to Ukraine to help with the water purification issues. Perhaps that's something we need to expand work in that area, but also, I guess, in terms of some modular heating kind of systems, perhaps that we could help, facilitate you getting them. So I look forward to us continuing our discussions via email and other forms of communications. Again, thank you so very much. It is just daunting to hear of the enormous challenges that you all are facing on a day-to-day basis, dealing with your communities and trying to accommodate the IDPs. Our hearts, our prayers and thoughts are with you, and we will do the best that we can to give you the kind of support that you need. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.